nhớ rong trong phong yi rong xa nó nó buổi đêm mình mới say tới cho London đôi khi thì xong áp hàng cầu sang bé tàu muốn gì say luôn trong London anh ký tới chờ London hãy luôn trong bé trên đó lúc tới chờ anh ký trong London hãy luôn trong cố cứ tàu mua kênh cử cho cả một số samaই Lao Roman Empire. Anh ký lúc tê trời dạy lúc bỏ chỉ lúc nhỏ trò sang cậu tê nụ bông tê vĩnh tê Euro. Anh ký lúc bê tata hồ ở United Kingdom. Mà mua ở England, Scotland, Wales, Hà Northern Ireland nhỏ ok. Luôn trong London mà mua con mua bê vì tại giờ lô học bảo trò sang nhà cha ha trò chữ kế và mê ăn kít giờ ít lưu chờ cứ mua ít cho làn dê lu lu xì tên cứ mua bề hồ của Stonehenge ha mua ít lưu chế cần tới cái xa cứ mua con mua bề hệ hồ của Oxford ha Cambridge từ lệ Thames lư phổ lại cho hồ luôn trong London nhớ cho hồ lúc lại trong London giờ trong phủ lu từ chế House of Parliament cứ giờ lúc tết chờ cứ chỉ trong một cái chữ phủ bằng phổ sĩ lừa nhớ cho hồ cán đồ khứ nó cho chờ chỉnh chỉnh nhớ cho hồ luôn trong nó mùa lên nó ý giờ Big Ben Town đến từ lệ thèn mua ý từ bê thọ cứ mua bê sau từ bê thọ mà mua ý lô mong lô hẹn bê hồ hòa Big Ben cứ giờ lô mong lô cứ tỏa tàu lô sẽ hận chân chạp lờ nhớ trở hôm là tê lúc Big Ben Town nó mua ít bộ chỉ cho xong luôn là ta chỉ nói xong chỉ cho xong ít phải ít bộ chỉ cho gì lúc mong lúc nó nhà chờ cậu bê tông ngày ở Tower Bridge từ cho Bridge Tower Bridge nói cho ít từ cho suspension suốt lời bao giờ từ Tower Bridge nó giờ London Bridge nhớ cho hồ từ lệ Thames River từ cho Tower Bridge nó cho ít lưu chỉ cho luôn trong London anh kít tao chỉ từ cho nó thao xong ít phải gì bùa gì cho trao luôn là từ cho Tower Bridge nó mua ở lu cho Tower lo tao mua lu Tower Bridge nó sao ý răng cao hồ trong nhảy giao hồ hồ London Bridge. London Bridge is falling down. Cái bé Britain Museum British Museum cho ít lưu chờ cho cú chân cú tề sau ít phá sang bộ chỉ cho bé lưu Britain Museum nó chính chính hay vì tao khởi tê cú kênh cử tôn này ha tôn này tê kế và nên chỉ thầu sang plot trong lưu mong là lưu Britain Museum nói cho ít lưu chờ khởi tê cú chân cú tê cứ lưu trang lời nhớ trâu hồ là tê nó ha lưu ha một tê lưu cô chân cú tê cứ mua chi một chùa trang lời vì khởi tàu tê cú chân cú tê luôn để cho viện tê tan trò nhớ trò hồ căn tu cứ nó tê dạng cứ chính chính do Rasta Stone cứ do từ giờ si khá chữ cho đạo Heritage để cho Egyptian ha giờ khó chờ cứ cho mì gì mami cho mình mà mi cho ý cho tôn hệ Egypt cứ tuổi lo mua lo tàu mua khử ha là tàu chen có bồi xong luôn là cái bao Buckingham by Palace giờ bùa phó tài Elizabeth thì lúc chơi nhau tao lúc có trong vàng lòng sĩ ua chờ lòng cho rủ cho tu trò rủ khó trong ô cho tôi này tôi sĩ nhà sai hình chỉ lúc chỉ lì mò lù rồi lúc sáng lên đồ mà yếu mua cái lòng cho tu trò rủ lúc khó trong cho chùa thằng kỳ lòng đợi chỉ yếu mua cái sĩ lòng ino cái ino cái chi London ai nhớ chùa sang thủ lệ Thames sang tí mỗi lu cao vùng vùng mà chỉ lệ biết cho phên trái thịnh hoa London ai là do London lúc khó mua lúc London ai nó mua chùa biết cho lúc capsule so tôi xì rồi in chỉ thành tròn thì tao tôi này lệ biết cho lên rồi lúc capsule nó dạy lúc tao kicking cho tôi này mới nhon thì tao lệ biết cho lên lúc cao vô nó mà chỉ riêng chín trẻ là lệ thằng thì tao tôi này chỉ sốt lời bằng chi cho lệ tốt lại cho hồ lúc capsule sư thảo lúc cao vô kỳ mà vô bộ thành trò tê chờ chỉnh nhau tròn tờ từ lệ thăm Thames River lệ bếp bộ trò chào đình kỳ lúc cao vô kỳ nói hay lúc cao vô cứ sát chạp lời nhau trò hồ viện tế yếu rột thành trò tôi xì ý lúc xong từ mà mua tôn này màu say luôn London ai chú lệ bê phình chi plot từ tôn này tôi màu say London ai lúc cao vùng London ai nó sát châu ít bộ chi châu chi mệt là do blog bộ blog cho bê phít lãng châu ít bộ nâng cầu mệt là do bế bùa cho bao phít xong áp hàng thảo cứ lúc London ai nhà khen trô sốt là sai mà London ai nhà lúc cao vô hồn kỹ cứ sát chạp lại nhớ trô hồn là tế ta chỉ nó mua bế lúc cao vô hồn kỹ cứ chính xác lô lô London ai nó là ha yellow star na chỉ nhá số tự cho tết chờ sang nút to nhá luôn tròn na chỉ cứ họ lu bị chính hồ lu sinh trên sĩ lu star of na chỉ sang dù ít bộ trò chào mệt cho xong ấp hàng trào lu o do Singapore flyer ô ta nhớ Singapore chùa ta tàu cho xong ấp hành gì sát dù ít bộ cho chậu chi mệt lời giờ chi bộ bắt cho ít phít lúc bê cứ giờ lúc cao vô vùng sát chạp lời ta xin nói giờ lúc high roller nhớ trong Las Vegas Saint Nevada sát chứ ít bộ trò chơi sang mình lại giờ chỉ bộ bao chơi sang phít, tôi ta trò xong ấp hàng cọp lao, ta xin nó lúc high roller, giờ lúc cao vô vùng cứ sát chạm lời nhớ chùa trong phủ America tết chờ, cái trao Tower of London, luôn cho Tower of London, ta xin nó giờ lúc chờ cha tê hoa tài ha, bu hoa tài tê có mỏ cú, tê thì trò nà ha, tê ta cứ phua tài ha phua tài nàng mong vàพิธีเลยอยู่กี่กายตาจับปวชองลูหลายักตาลูผู้พ่อตาอังกีวิโอลิน The Conqueror ตาวจีจาง The Tower of London ชงอีผาช่างเจ้าหยีจีคลองดาวตาวสีว่าอีลูเจลอจูที่ชงอีผาอีบัวลูจูยวนดูชงจนจางอผาชงเจมัวอีลูลูสาเศร้าจะสุดเลยหัวตาสามหงตัวที่ลูทาวเจใช้ตาหัตตาสามหงรอลอยหอสามหงตัวหงเจ้าจีไกช่างลูกชายสีฟ้าสีเมย์ทรัฟเฟิลโกสแควร์อย่าอีลูตาลูกย่อตัวหูปลันจองลอนดอนchỉ lộ qua lúc trời dù chủ từ nọ lùa Hodges Nelson cứ nơi tàu đào trái riêng Napoleon hồ hán play trong lúa trò Battle of Trafalgar cho xong ít phải bộ chi nhớ cho hú bởi lúc tan đỡ mua ít tù chỉ xa cứ bua tù nọ Nelson tan tỏ sai luôn trong London đỡ mua bao chê cậu ăn ký tàu bua bao tù chính số ha mua ít cho lê Nam Phúc ngay gì mua Westminster Abbey cứ họ ý lô tổ chế bề hở văn chữ bề hồ và Saint Peter at Westminster lúc tổ chế bề hở văn chữ nó anh ký tao xí lúc chờ nó lúc chỉ trang phút tài là do trang phút tài giá thằng lù một chỗ sang nô bông tại lưu tổ chế Westminster Abbey nó chỉ họ bố phó tài Anh Kít Elizabeth thì ở lưu văn lòng hồ Palace of Westminster bố phó tài Anh Kít Elizabeth ở nó chỉ nano chữ phụ ở chữ tế chữ chờ cho lúc tế chờ Anh Kít ta chỉ nó lúc vào lòng nó giờ lúc vào lòng rồng gạo ha cố chăm lời sửa chế cho cái chữ phụ văn hóa văn phó tài lù tàu đến hình lù lợi ngày chùa Saint Paul Catherine cứ giờ ít lúc tổ chế về hở văn chữ cho cái tour guide khá hạt tà thao cho German tua跑路tua cho anh ký tế chờ thầm lúa trà lu hôm là tê ra o mà mỗi lu một chữ 跑路 hình bông cà trồ tỏ ta lúc khó trông lúc tổ chế nó ta sẽ lúc một chuyện đời chỉ ta ngay cậu the Palace of Westminster cho lúc tổ chế cứ cho nó ăn ký tàu sẽ ở bộ lúc chờ sang lang the House of Parliament cho政府ăn ký lúc tổ chế nó tao trang tao xong ít phản chụp bùa nhau cho sang cậu tê chỉ cho nó chứ kế bê cho bê xịn lời họ sắp hạ cái xa hồ ua House of Commons nhau sang con tê chỉ họ cho nó chứ sắp hạ xa hồ ua House of the Law Jinamota go Jamemo Shai Lundong London. Chambers ha Jengo ha or she lekugo Tam Hong Pulula.
Nroog London ai đấy cuộc sống là quốc tế của giờ Thames của Spain.
אמא, למה הוא מחופש האיש הזה עם השחר, אמא? אולי למה? ללוחם. מה זה לוחם? מישהו שנלחם. סליחה שאת נלחם לי.
That bunch there, see where it is in one bunch? Yes. And that, but from that orange thing, yes, that orange thing is the fast one.
מה זה אם לא? מה זה פה? איפה הסיפול? רואה פה את הקולה? מה זה השפיץ כזה? בניין כזה עגול עם שפיץ?
That's what I was afraid of.
מה זה? איפה? גדולה, גדולה, גדולה. יש לנו אינטרנציה עולה?
See what those
I'm going to be singing more next year. I'm going to be a featured person next year because I want to have people sing. Remember I told you he's studying that as because he's like one and directing as much as trying to combine it. So I'm singing
Nice to get the opportunity they got you. And that one of those secret points inside the ship. The secret thing was just in the ship, not inside the ship.
We are now approaching the exit platform. Please ensure you have all of your belongings with you when leaving the platform. If you are a wheelchair user, please wait until other exits are disembarked and either is not accessible.
I bet you that there is.
And also from our crew this evening, you're in the very capable hands of our Captain Sid and his engineer's name's Alan. He's been you've met him already, should come on.
But please listen carefully to the following short safety announcement. This boat is licensed to carry 249 passengers. We maintain constant contact with Thames Navigation and the River Police at all times. This boat is equipped with a full complement of life jackets and life rafts. Life jackets.
Goodness me, what just happened? What? I leave you up here for 5 minutes and the flipping door and the bridge opens on you. God, what are you like? Well, let's save one from. I was going to tell you the bridge was going to open. Good evening. Welcome aboard the Silver Bonito. My name's Tony. I know some of you have come with Jason. And just to do the introductions again, our captain this evening is Sid, and he's assisted by the engineer, and his name's Alan. And we're going to explore the River Thames. Liquid history is what we're fond of calling it. The silver thread that runs through London's history is the River Thames. The reason for London being here in the first place. Had you been here, 100 years ago, that huge ship you've just seen come through the old power generating station, the most visited and popular modern art gallery in the world is what they're claiming. Up to 7 million people a year is the claim that visit the Tate Modern. But as I've been hinting to my group, we are getting very excited about next year and the Olympics. And there's other big schemes in London as well. And one of them is related to what we're coming up to now, which is Blackfriars Bridge. And on the top of the old railway bridge that's been going for well over 100 years, they're building a brand new station. A state-of-the-art is what the word they love to use, and it's going to have 2 entrances, one on the north bank of the River Thames, and over there to your left-hand side on the south bank of the River Thames. So it's going to be ready, we're promised, all these promises we're getting, it's going to be ready next year in 2012, in time for the Olympics, and it's going to be part of a huge thing called a Crossrail link-up. Is going to be coming here as well. So this is Blackfriars Rail Bridge. There used to be another rail bridge across here, known as St Paul's Bridge, but they took down most of the bridge, but they left the old columns standing. If they had demolished them, it would have damaged the other 2 bridges either side. And this is Blackfriars Road Bridge, opened in 1869 by Queen Victoria, who was very upset that day because the crowds turned out just to give her a hard time. They booed the dear lady and she got very, very upset. Just as we come through, look to your right-hand side, you'll see a very large white building curving round with the columns on it. That's Uni Lever House from the 1930s. Uni Lever are a bit like Nabisco or like Procter & Gamble. They own brands. They own brands like Dove soap. They own soap powders like Persil. And they also own Ben & Jerry's ice cream as well. So they just own the brands. The building next to it with a very steep roof and the kind of spire there you can see, that used to be a boys' school. It was called the City of London Boys' School. I believe now it's a Japanese bank. It's the headquarters for that. So they're reusing the buildings that we have on here in the City of London, but keeping the outline of them. The ship on the right-hand side there, that was built at the end of the First World War, HMS President, and it was built to hunt out U-boats. God, I got it out in the end. And it's been used for all sorts of things. It's been a headquarters for a charity, but now you can hire the place and have yourself an event on these beautiful, balmy, warm evenings that we enjoy. Not at all here in London. So, as you can do, I think we're just masochistic, firstly. Behind those trees on your right-hand side, what a great skyline we've got tonight. You're very lucky to see it. Behind there is one of the great legal areas now, is what it is, the Inner and Middle Temple. It wasn't always for lawyers. Back up until the 14th century, the Knights Templars had their headquarters. The Knights Templars were they were monks, but they were warrior monks, and they protected the Christian pilgrims on their way to the Holy Land. They were based. Their headquarters was in Jerusalem. They were kicked out in the early 14th century, and the lawyers have been there ever since, more or less. To the right, that white ship moored there permanently. That was once seen very busy service in the 1950s around the seas around New Zealand, and the name of it might be a bit of a giveaway. This is HMS Wellington. This is the Wellington, not HMS, the Wellington, and it's now been back moored on the banks of the River Thames. It's actually a livery hall. You might call it a club for retired sea captains. So that's what it's been used for. And again, that you can hire it out. They're looking more and more for people to hire that boat because the moorings to have they've been going up. So the river's having itself a bit of a revival. One thing that's definitely always on the up, and that's the theatre in this country. And one of the leading theatres that we have is over there to your left-hand side. You can see the names of the shows that are on at the moment. The National Theatre. And that particular building was opened in 1976. It's got 3 auditoriums, and they do magnificent backstage tours to tell you about how they're putting on the productions. Because they've probably got 24 plays at a time will be in their repertory, and they show you how they do it all. Prince Charles does not like that building. He once described it as looking like a nuclear power plant on the banks of the River Thames. I don't actually agree with Prince Charles for once. Please don't tell him. I'll probably be in right trouble if you do. But I don't. I think it's a wonderful building inside. But stand by. We're about to go under the longest bridge over the River Thames, and it was built mainly by women in the Second World War. And when you think about it, if it was built by women, it's bound to be the longest bridge over the River Thames, isn't it? Because it's going to go on and on and on. That's an amazing sexist joke. So that is. Let's get rid of that joke and look to the right. Have a look at these nice white buildings here on the right hand side. The one closest to us has got a solitary flagpole in the centre there. That's the Savoy Hotel, and it originally opened in 1889. It was lit entirely by electricity, and it had its ensuite bathrooms, which was another new thing. Next door to it, much younger, that's from 1932 with that huge clock. That's Shell Mex House, and no longer the headquarters for the oil company. And just again, you look at that obelisk, that's what it's called, that piece of stone there on the right, that's called Cleopatra's Needle. It takes its name from the ship that brought it from Egypt back in the late 19th century. It was given to this country as a gift by a guy called Muhammad Ali for our help during the Napoleonic Wars. He was in Egypt. He wasn't the great fighter. So it's been here since 1878 on the banks of the River Thames, and it's got its twin in New York, in Central Park, New York. But one of the great things why the south bank of the River Thames is becoming the place to go is so easy to get to, with these magnificent Golden Jubilee walkways that we've built either side of the Hungerford Rail Bridge, just between. So you can wave to those people because it's so easy for them to get to and from the south bank. And the Golden Jubilee, in case you're wondering, that was in 2002 with the Queen's Golden Jubilee, and they have been a huge addition to London. And one thing they've definitely helped with is with the popularity of the structure that you can see now on your left-hand side. Everybody says, there's that Ferris wheel. And people are saying it more and more, and it's now been recognised. This is the London Eye, as we call it. It's now become the most recognisable building in London and become the kind of landmark structure for London. It was the idea of a husband and wife team back in 1994. He's the engineer, he's American, she's the architect, she's British. And the idea was to have a wheel to represent eternity. And that's what they put forward, and eventually they got permission to have it built. And they got people to sponsor them, and that was British Airways, hence you still take a flight on the London Eye. You've got 32 pods, and you can get about 25 people or so in each of them. And they go round very, very slowly indeed. Well, it takes about half an hour, but as you go around, your view of London is transformed, and it is absolutely fantastic. It is sensational, and it deserves to be this country's most popular paying attraction, in my humble opinion. You can actually get married on the London Eye. You get your own pod, you get in there with the person who's going to carry out the nuptials for you. You go right to the very top. When you get to the very top, you take your vows. But after that, it's all downhill. There we are. Now, has anybody spotted anything here on the right-hand side? Yes, you've spotted that. You've spotted the clock tower to the new Palace of Westminster. That's what you've spotted. And the new Palace of Westminster, as we now call it, is also referred to as the Houses of Parliament. And that is just called the clock tower. But first, let's get under Westminster Bridge, because this bridge is the current version of it. Some of you perhaps learnt your English poetry years ago and remember the lines composed upon Westminster Bridge by William Wordsworth. Earth has not anything to show more fair. Dull would he be of soul who could pass by a sight so touching in its majesty. I think this was well before they built the building we're about to see in its full splendour. If you're downstairs, can I recommend you come up and have a good look at this building. As I said, its official title is the new Palace of Westminster. There's been a palace on the site for well over 900 years, and for 500 years it has been the home of our national legislature, Parliament. But most of the old Palace of Westminster was destroyed by a fire in 1834. And as the old House of Commons burned, such was the love and esteem of the people of London for their beloved Parliament, they all stood around and cheered, and they wouldn't let anybody put the fire out. So we then had to, when it was all most of it destroyed by fire, they held an architectural competition. And the man who won that competition was a man called Charles Barry. So Charles Barry is the architect of this building, and he was assisted by a brilliant but eccentric designer called Augustus Pugin. And it's made in a kind of Gothic style building. It's not early English Gothic, it's called the Perpendicular Gothic. And it was built between 1840 and 1860, and it contains our two chambers of our national legislature. They stopped their hard work yesterday. We insisted, enough, we said. Go off and give yourself 10 weeks holiday. God knows you deserve it, and give yourself a pay rise. We didn't say that last bit, but that's where they've gone away on their summer holidays now. The House of Lords, the non-elected chamber, and the House of Commons, which is the elected chamber. We'll come back to that building in just a moment. Do have a good look up at the Victoria Tower as we go past here. It contains the records of Parliament since the year 1497. The Acts of Parliament that have been passed, all on vellum. As I once explained to somebody, it looks like a wallpaper shop in there, just row after row of these long rows of what they have our Acts of Parliament. But we're about to turn any second now. We're going to turn our eyes over there to the left-hand side, briefly at least, because you can see just beyond the trees, you can actually see a church tower. The church tower is for St Mary's at Lambeth, and the name comes from the Lamb of Bethlehem, which was an inn that was down there. And St Mary's at Lambeth is no longer used as a church. It was for many years. It was used, but nowadays it's a garden museum. But in the churchyard is buried a very famous man. He's a famous man if you know your movies. If you ever saw the movie the Mutiny on the Bounty, you've got about 4 or 5 of them to choose from. I'm a bit of a Charles Lawton man myself, because he played the man who's buried in the churchyard, Captain Bligh, and he was the man who was on the Bounty with Fletcher Christian. He later became the governor of New South Wales in Australia, and that's where he was laid to rest after he returned after the mutiny. It's now a garden museum, And we always warn people when you come to this country, the kind of people you've got to watch out for are the gardeners in this country. Grey-haired old ladies, they go out at night, they mug crack dealers to get the money to get their next geranium. So those are there. And beside that is Lambeth Palace, but look back, what a sky. What a sky, doesn't that look fantastic? You don't see it every night like me, do you? But no, it looks sensational, beautifully floodlit, and a very lovely sky. We don't get great sunsets in London as a general rule, but that's not bad, is it? I'm bound to say. As I said, the Victoria Tower containing the records of Parliament, and at the far end, the Great Clock Tower. Later in the week, I think it's Wednesday, Parliament begins to open each day from Monday to Saturday. So you can visit it, just £14 for an adult to visit. You get to visit both chambers, the House of Lords and the House of Commons. And you hear about the arcane ritual that we're so very fond of in this country, the state opening of Parliament. And it's funny that now it's not in, now that they've gone off for their summer holidays, usually you see lively crowds along in the awnings, these kind of tents they have on the front here, on the terrace. It cost £2 million to build. You wouldn't buy a lot for £2 million in Westminster nowadays. You certainly wouldn't get you a 1,100 room palace, I'll tell you that for nothing. First time, and they realised when it first went, the clangor was too heavy, and it crashed the bell. So they just had to turn it around and crack the bell. And the bell is named after a man called Benjamin Hall. And Benjamin Hall, we're told, was as round as he was tall, and he was known as Big Ben. So I have to tell you, you don't see Big Ben when you're in London, if you're lucky enough to be here. Very, very tough indeed. We still had rationing 10 years after, more rationing than we had 10 years previously during the Second World War. And the government of the day decided we needed cheering up, we had to look to the future. So over there on the site of an old brewery, they had the Festival of Britain for the summer, and it was a way of making us look to the future and to cheer us up. And the Royal Festival Hall is the one building that survived from that time, and then it led on to the founding of all these art places like this, the Queen Elizabeth Hall, the Purcell rooms. You can have recital rooms they use for modern dance, folk.
South end of Bond Street. Keep looking on the left. We'll go really slowly here. In fact, we'll almost grind to a halt here. Just look into the Burlington Arcade. You cannot run, sing, hum or carry parcels if you go down that street there. And there's a couple of gentlemen who will stop you doing any of that. Also, on our right, this is Fortnum and Mason. Fortnum and Mason, the oldest department store in London, dates back to 1707. And you never know who you're going to see in there. There was one gentleman shopping in there in the 1920s, saw a woman he recognised. He said, "Hello, how are you?" Thinking, I can't think of her name. I know the face, I can't think. She said, "I'm very well, how are you?" He said, "I'm very well, yes, and tell me," he said, "how is your husband?" She said, "He's very well, yes, very well." He said, "Oh, good, good." And he thought, no clues there. He said, what's he doing now?" She said, "Oh, he's still king." He suddenly realised he'd just bumped into Queen Mary, the wife of George V, and his chances of a knighthood had just about crashed and burned. Cording's store, just on the left-hand side there, they ran into trouble about 10 years ago, and they were bailed out by one of their customers who said, "I just want to buy my clothes there, I want to continue it." How flash is that? His name, by the way, was Eric Clapton. Piccadilly Circus, and here, on the right-hand side, here is Piccadilly Circus. There is the Angel of Christian Charity with his bow, but no arrow. And behind him, we've got the Criterion Theatre, and also the Criterion Restaurant. That, by the way, the Criterion Restaurant is where the first Sherlock Holmes novel starts. Dr. Watson is having a drink there. On our right is the Mamma Mia show. the Mamma Mia show. This is at the Prince of Wales Theatre, part of this theatre, where it's sort of in the theatre district of London here, the West End. And it was here in 1963 that the Beatles topped the bill in what we refer to as the Royal Variety Performance. And before their last number, which happened to be Twist and Shout, John Lennon, I was telling you about. Through his battles, this is the Battle of Trafalgar, as I say, his last battle. There's also, just to the right-hand side, is the Battle of Copenhagen. Nelson heard about this. His second-in-command said the Admiral had sent up the signal to withdraw. He said, "Pass me my telescope." He raised it to his blind eye and said, "I see no such signal." What are you talking about? Proceed. So he was quite a maverick character, old Nelson. Anyway, it's the site of the old Whitehall Palace. And on our right-hand side, the Admiralty buildings. This is the old Admiralty building. You see with the columns in front of it. Ian Fleming, the author of the James Bond novels, worked as he was second in command of military naval intelligence during the Second World War. And on our left-hand side, this is the War Office, is located here. And across the street to the other side, this is the Horse Guards building. So we might even get a glimpse of one of the horse. On the right down the street, and there's a golden orb just above the entrance door. Just see that golden orb there. That's it, number 10. And the cenotaph, where we commemorate our glorious dead, is this obelisk in the middle of the street we're just passing by here. The building on the right-hand side, by the way, that is the Foreign Office. And the next one, this building here on the right-hand side, is the Treasury building. Now, Curtis has brought us all the way down Whitehall. We're now in fact at the end of Whitehall in a street called Parliament Street, and it leads us into Parliament Square. Parliament, from parler, and it's basically, this is where we do all the chatting, at the big building on the left hand side, known as the Houses of Parliament, otherwise the Palace of Westminster. And you'll see the clock tower, of course, showing us the time, which contains a bell called Big Ben. The clock tower is not Big Ben, it's the bell inside it. But there is that's the Houses of Parliament on our left-hand side. And the camping this is all about people protesting against the war in Iraq and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. There was the gentleman who started this protest died 2 months ago, sadly, but the protest goes on. And the white coloured building you see here, this is the St Margaret's Church, the parish church of Westminster, but it's dwarfed by the huge church behind it. That is Westminster Abbey, that church that you see there. And that's where all the coronations since 1066 have taken place, and where that royal wedding on the 29th of April took place. Her Majesty the Queen was also married in that church. And as Curtis takes us round, look at all the flags in the centre here. That's the Commonwealth countries, and on the corner is the statue of Winston Churchill, our wartime Prime Minister. And Curtis is going to take us past, this is the House of Commons behind this section here. The oldest part of the Houses of Parliament is this sloping grey roof. This date executed Charles I, the parliamentarian, and then we have the House of Lords located behind these buildings here. The man with his sword in the air, that of course is Richard I, Richard Coeur de Lion, the Lionheart. And you can actually visit the House of Parliament. It's open for the summer sessions for visiting. There's the Sovereign's entrance. That's where the Queen goes into the Houses of Parliament to open the Parliament. And that happens, at the beginning of each parliamentary session. It takes 3 elements to bring a parliament into play, and those are the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and the Sovereign. That constitutes a parliament. And the Queen, of course, reads the Queen's speech. It's called the Queen's speech because she reads it. She hasn't written it. It's been written by her government, and it lays out the legislation for the parliamentary term ahead. And that's what they're measured against. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to get another fantastic riverside view of the Houses of Parliament, because Curtis is going to take us round to the left over Lambeth Bridge, and we want you to have a look sharply back on the left-hand side. Over in the distance ahead of us, you see there's a tall tower going up. That's the new tallest building in not just the UK, but in Europe, is being built over there. And the rocket-shaped building in the distance ahead of us, can you see that? That's over in the City of London. So that's the eastern part. We're going to head over in that direction. Here, though, we have the Houses of Parliament, and this is Lambeth Bridge that we're on. And of course the London Eye, we get a side-on view of the London Eye, which is not a Ferris wheel, it's an observation wheel. That means Ferris wheels have the cars on the inside, the carriages on the inside. In an observation wheel they'll be on the outside. And so the purpose is that you can see out and you get a fantastic view, 25 miles in every direction from the observation wheel there. Now, as we curve round to the left, you get a last couple of glimpses of the Houses of Parliament through the trees here. The building on our right, by the way, this is Lambeth Palace, the home of the London home of the Archbishop of Canterbury. And we'll go nice and slowly just so you get a chance to get a quick snap. We can't stop, unfortunately. It's double red lines, which forbids our stopping at any time. But we can crawl along a little bit. And it's just there's the two white towers of Westminster Abbey just behind the tall tower that is known as the Victoria Tower, where we saw the Sovereign's entrance. And on our right hand side over here, this is the garden, the largest private garden in London is owned by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, and it's used by the Archbishop himself and indeed his staff on a clear day. And today's a pretty good day, actually. It's a pretty good day for. And in the foreground, of course, the Royal Festival Hall with the blue markings on the side of it. And to our right hand side, the Fox. And we get a great view of the two cities of London. To our right hand side, the City of London. That's the ancient part. There's the dome of St. Paul's with the cross on the top and that little tower on the top of the dome. The rocket-shaped building known as the Gherkin. And to the left, we get a fabulous view of the City of Westminster. So the two cities best seen from Waterloo Bridge. This is Waterloo Bridge that we're on now. And as we cross to the north side of the bridge, there's a little red brick building just tucked away behind these trees, red and white. And that is actually, it was the home of the BBC when they were the British Broadcasting Company, now the British Broadcasting Corporation when they first came into being, and it's now the Institute of Electrical Engineers located on the right hand side, this ugly building here. You see the Totem Pole? Totem Pole is interesting. It's 7 heads, one on top of another, and if you look at the one at the
were built by the same man. His name was Christopher Wren, Sir Christopher Wren as he became, and he's important because he was rebuilding after the Great Fire of London. The Great Fire took place in 1666, 666. The number of the beast. They said something bad was going to happen that year, and it did. This fire ripped through. It started over on the east side of town, and it ripped through and destroyed 3/4 of the old city within the Roman walls. And they lost, out of the 97 churches that we had, we lost 87. So Wren was rebuilding. He was charged with rebuilding the churches of London, which was a mammoth undertaking. He managed 51 churches here in London, plus that is his masterpiece. So what we're going to do is go a short distance ahead. We'll turn left and you will get the most stunning view of St. Paul's with, of course, this magnificent dome. So on the top of the dome is a cross. And the cross right on the top of the dome up there, the highest point of that cross is 365 feet from ground level. 365. which is a number that rings a bell for all of us, doesn't it? 365. Why does that ring a bell? Days of the year. Exactly so. Is it a coincidence? The answer is no. Why? Oh, I'll tell you in a minute. If you look that way, the building on the other side of that bridge, that is exactly what it used to be. So hence the chimney on it. It's the Bankside Power Station, now converted into the world's most popular modern art museum. And if you're going that way, people are going, wow, look at the museum, it's fantastic. And if you're coming this way, people go, wow, look at St. Paul's, this is magnificent. The church, my goodness me, but hang on, think about it. The end of the 17th century, going into the 18th century, a remarkable undertaking. And the fact is, the church was completed within the lifetime of its architect. So Wren lived to see this church. He did actually live quite a long time. He died at the age of 91, born in 1623 and died in 1732. Sorry, born in 1632, died in 1723. So 91 years of age. And he did not get to see the church as we see it today, in this pristine condition, because whilst it was being built, with the smog and the fog and the dirt and the grime of London, it became discoloured and darkened. And so in recent years, remember I said 1675 to 1710, 1710 to 2010, last year was the 300th anniversary of this church, and we cleaned it in preparation for that. And what we do these days is we don't scrub buildings, we spray on a latex foam, and that seeps, it literally goes into the pores, and as you pull that off, it draws out the dirt and grime without damaging the fabric more than is necessary. And we end up with something that looks, you know, absolutely in first class, clean, mint condition. There will be an opportunity for you to go into the church. I can't guide you through the church today because it's Sunday, so it's church service day. And when you do go into the church, if you do go into the church, can I just ask you a couple of favours? If you've got chewing gum, lose it before you go in the church, okay? Don't go into the church chewing gum, because it's just disrespectful to you. Also, because it's a working church, gentlemen would have to be bareheaded when you go into the church. So just a marker there. And the other thing is, please, please, please do not attempt to take photographs. You know, it's church service day. Well, we're not allowed to take photographs when it's open Monday to Saturday. And then there is a cone, a brick cone that supports the tower right at the top. So within the outer dome and outside the inner dome. And it's that combination of different structures that gives you 64,000 tons. Now, just pull in a little bit closer, come in a little bit tighter. They're large, slightly unwieldy. Christopher Wren says to one of his workmen, he says, bring me a stone that I might mark the centre spot of the church. So this guy who can't read or write goes out, and there's the old churchyard is outside. He picks up a stone from the churchyard. There's all this debris lying all over the place. He puts it under his arm and carries it through. It's part of a headstone. He's carried it through. And he hasn't actually looked at it. He wants a stone, I'll get him a stone, you know. So we sometimes refer to this church as Wren's Phoenix, because that's what it calls to rise from the ashes of its former self. Incidentally, I mentioned the figures here. When you go around the church, on the other side, at the front, right at the front of the pediment there, the top of it is St. Paul. And on the far side of him is St. Peter. We'll get a glimpse of that when we go around the front. Might be a bit noisy with bells, but we'll see how the timing is. And then you've got, you know, St. James, so St. Peter, St. Paul, St. James, and also Matthew, Mark, Luke and John are at the front of the church. But I don't need to tell you that, because you've all seen Mary Poppins. And Julie Andrews sings all around, I'm not going to sing it, please. All around the cathedral, the saints and apostles look down as she sells her wares. Although we...
Now you're right in front of the St. Paul Cathedral, the church, Nroog London. What chỉ trong thời điểm sinh trâu bò trâu chợ trâu lúc non đã thân cho nên là có tất thơ lông bọc của bông tới sự phải lông bọc chỉ tới cái second world war thì lúc chơi cái môn bê cho cười nhất rồi của London.
He was the third son of George III. So George has, well, he has a number of children, but his first three, kind of the key ones, he has George, who succeeds him, becoming George IV. He has Frederick, the Grand Old Duke of York, whose statue I mentioned further down here. And then he has William, who becomes the Duke of Clarence. When George dies, his son George becomes George IV, and I said, you know, his daughter dies in childbirth, so she's not going to succeed. So it goes down to Frederick. Frederick's next in line. He's already dead though when his brother dies in 1830, so he doesn't become King Frederick. He would, you know, would have been. We haven't had a King Frederick, but he would have been it. And it would then go to one of his children, but unfortunately, although he has 5 children, they're all illegitimate. So it passes to the Duke of Clarence, the third son, and he becomes King William IV. And they say Buckingham Palace, the building right at the end of the street here, is now just about complete and ready. You can go and live there. And he says, I don't want to live there. That's far too big. I'm going to stay here. So he is King William IV from that building there. So that's his location. He dies 7 years later in 1837, and his niece, Princess Victoria, becomes Queen Victoria. She goes to live in Buckingham Palace. So that becomes her London principal residence, Buckingham Palace. And from that point on, it's the principal residence of the sovereign. What happens to this building is that it becomes basically passed through members of the royal family, and it is given to the Queen Mother when her husband George VI dies in 1952. So she's living in Buckingham Palace as the Queen Consort. Her husband dies, her daughter becomes Queen, you know, Buckingham Palace moves in, so the Queen Mother moves out, moves into Clarence House. When the Queen Mother dies 50 years later, her favourite grandson, Prince Charles, who has an apartment in St James's at the time, he moves across. So hence it becomes the official residence, this cream-coloured building, the London residence of Prince Charles. And the former Camilla Parker Bowles, the Duchess of Cornwall. And Princes William and Harry. And even though William has now got married, he is now, you know, the Duke of Cambridge, married to the Duchess of Cambridge, the former Kate Middleton. They are sharing an apartment there with his brother, her new brother-in-law, Prince Harry. What fun that must be when he comes into the close. They open this building up to the public at this time of the year. It hasn't, I don't think it's officially open yet, but within the next week or so they will open it, and it's possible to visit Clarence House. They've gone away, they'll go away for the summer. They won't be here. What we're going to do is just go down. There's a couple of guards on the right hand side and there is just time to go and get a photo of one of the guards. So we'll go.
To look Buckingham Palace, the Queen Elizabeth trên con tàu nhỏ của thằng sao này, the Buckingham Palace.
back to Rolls-Royce and resprayed this.
Okay, the name of Buckingham Palace. Bên một xe tải.
Westminster Bridge, the bridge just ahead of us, is actually one of the smallest bridges on the Thames. It's got very shallow arches, and this boat is flickering like, you look behind yourselves, Lambeth Bridge is red. It's actually to symbolise the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Have you ever seen on the television the House of Commons sit on green chairs and the House of Lords on red chairs? That's actually good though, because believe it or not, it's actually illegal for the Totem Pole. They're not allowed to. It's directly behind itself to that white stone building there, just behind the trees. It's the Ministry of Defence building, Whitehall. Now Whitehall is also known